For most of modern history, we've been taught a simple economic story. If people are rational, they buy what's cheaper. If markets are open, the most efficient producer wins. And if countries trade freely, prices fall and everyone benefits. That logic shaped globalization. Factories moved to where labor was cheaper. Supply chains stretched across oceans. Consumers enjoyed lower prices. Corporations enjoyed higher margins. And no country mastered this system better than China. China became the world's factory not because of ideology, but because it understood the math of scale better than anyone else. So if the rules are so clear, why does the global economy suddenly feel unstable? Why tariffs? Why trade wars? Why technology bans, chip controls, and broken supply chains? Why does the United States, the country that built the free trade system, now seem to be breaking it? To understand this, we need to step away from economics textbooks and look at history the way power actually works. At the level of everyday life, price matters. When you buy a phone, you compare features and cost. When you shop online, cheaper feels smarter. That instinct is rational. This kind of rationality built China's rise. Global companies didn't move factories to China out of charity. They moved because it was cheaper, faster, and more efficient. China invested in ports, roads, power plants, and industrial zones. It trained millions of workers. It accepted low profit margins to gain scale. Over time, China didn't just make cheap goods. It built entire ecosystems. Suppliers next to factories. Factories next to ports. Ports connected to the world. Once that machine was running, it became almost impossible to compete on price. This is why so many countries, when given a choice, buy from China. Not because of politics, because of cost. At the consumer level, China wins. But nations do not think like consumers. They think like survivors. This is where the story changes. A country's goal is not to get the cheapest product. Its goal is to remain powerful enough to shape its own future. And power does not come from price alone. It comes from control. The mistake many people make is treating the trade war as a disagreement over products. It is not about steel, washing machines, or solar panels. Those are symbols. The real conflict is about who controls the structure of the global economy. For decades, the United States didn't just participate in globalization. It designed it. After World War II, America helped create a system where trade rules were written in institutions it influenced. The dollar became the main currency for global trade. Financial markets flowed through US-controlled channels. Technology standards reflected American companies and laws. This system wasn't neutral. It reflected power at the time it was built, and for a long time, it worked beautifully for the United States. China entered this system later. It didn't try to overthrow it. It tried to use it. China exported more, saved more, invested more. It accepted being the low-cost producer while quietly climbing the value ladder. First toys, then electronics, then machinery, then technology. This is where tension began, because cheap manufacturing doesn't threaten an empire. Technological independence does. At some point, America realized something uncomfortable. China was no longer just producing goods. It was starting to compete in areas that define power. Advanced chips, artificial intelligence, telecommunications, military technology. This wasn't about cheaper phones anymore. This was about who would control the tools of the future. So America changed the game. Instead of competing on price, it competed on access. Access to technology, access to markets, access to systems. This is why the trade war looks strange if you only think in economic terms. Tariffs raise prices for American consumers. They hurt efficiency. They break the old free trade logic. But free trade only makes sense when it strengthens the state using it. When it doesn't, free trade becomes a liability. This is why Donald Trump matters. Not because he created the conflict, but because he said the quiet part out loud. For years, American policymakers debated behind closed doors whether globalization had gone too far. Trump turned that debate into policy. He didn't speak the language of economics. He spoke the language of power, jobs, factories, national strength. His tariffs weren't elegant. They weren't subtle. but they revealed a deeper shift. America was no longer optimizing for cheap goods, it was optimizing for control. To see this clearly, look at semiconductors. Chips are the oil of the modern world. They power phones, cars, weapons, satellites, and data centers. China buys a lot of chips. China makes some chips, but the most advanced ones remain out of reach. Why? Not because of price, because the choke points are controlled. Design software comes from the United States. Precision manufacturing machines come from Europe. Intellectual property is enforced by Western legal systems. America doesn't need to outproduce China here. It just needs to deny access. This is not a market decision. It is a strategic one. From China's perspective, this feels unfair. China followed the rules. It traded, it invested, it scaled. Now, when it reaches the top, the rules change. But history shows this pattern again and again. Rising powers use markets to grow. Established powers use systems to protect themselves. This conflict is not new. Britain did it in the 19th century. The United States did it in the 20th. When dominance is threatened, ideology bends. Free trade becomes conditional. Rules become flexible. Principles become tools. What makes this moment different is how visible it is. Supply chains breaking, prices rising, technology fragmenting. Globalization was sold as irreversible. History says nothing ever is. We are entering a world where efficiency is no longer the highest value. Resilience is. Governments are willing to pay more to depend less, to build factories at home, to friendshore production, to keep key industries within trusted borders. This would look irrational in a spreadsheet, but it makes sense in a crisis. For everyday people, this shift is confusing. You're told inflation is bad, then policies are passed that raise prices. You're told global trade is good, then borders quietly reappear. The explanation is simple. The goal has changed. China's strategy remains consistent. Win on price, win on scale. Build alternatives when blocked. This takes time, but China is patient. America's strategy is different. Slow the climb, protect the choke points, maintain leverage for as long as possible. Neither side is irrational. They are optimizing for different things. And this is why the conflict won't end soon. Because it is not about trade deficits or tariffs. It is about who sets the rules in the next era. This matters to your daily life more than you think. When products cost more, that's not just inflation, it's insurance. When technology is restricted, that's not just regulation, it's containment. When countries talk about national security in economic terms, it means markets have become battlefields. History teaches us something important here. Empires don't collapse the moment they lose efficiency. They collapse when they lose control. America understands this deeply. China is trying to change it. So when people say, China will win because it's cheaper, they are only half right. China wins markets, America fights for systems, and systems decide who survives when prices stop mattering. The world is no longer choosing the cheapest option, it's choosing sides. Not always openly, not always willingly, but increasingly, inevitably. Globalization promised one integrated economy. What we are moving toward is a fractured one. Two systems, two sets of rules, two definitions of rationality. One based on cost, the other on control. And in that world, the question is no longer, who can sell it cheaper? The question is, who can afford to let the other win? That is the real trade war, and it's not ending anytime soon.